A mafia boss sees a black girl defend his disabled son from bullies in the street. Nobody has ever dared to stand up for that boy. Until now. But what starts as one act of bravery turns into something far more dangerous. The girl thinks she can walk away, but the mafia boss won't let her. He demands she stay close to his son and to him. At first, she resists his iron control. But when enemies strike, she sees the truth. This man is a monster to the world, but a protector to her. Still, she doesn't know his darkest secret. The reason his son was hurt, and the bloody war that is coming for anyone who touches them. Now she's trapped between fear and desire, power and passion. And the real question is, will she escape his world, or become the one person this ruthless man would burn the city to keep forever? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The autumn morning painted New York's elite Upper East Side in shades of gold and crimson. Amara Brooks adjusted her worn messenger bag as she stepped out of St. Augustine's Preparatory Academy, where she'd been substitute teaching for the past week. The prestigious school's Gothic architecture loomed behind her, all gargoyles and centuries-old stone that spoke of old money and even older privilege. A commotion near the courtyard caught her attention. Through the morning mist, she spotted a group of teenagers, all designer clothes and perfectly styled hair, circled around something or someone. Their laughter carried across the manicured lawn, sharp and cruel. Her heart stopped when she saw what they were doing. A boy in a wheelchair sat trapped in their midst, his face a mask of quiet resignation as they tossed his textbooks into the muddy grass. His shoulders were hunched, hands gripping the wheels of his chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "Look at the cripple trying to get his books," one of the boys sneered, shoving another text into the mud with his expensive leather shoe. "Maybe if you weren't such a useless freak, you could pick them up yourself." Something snapped inside Amara. Without thinking about consequences or protocol, she stormed across the lawn. Her sensible teaching heels sank into the wet grass, but she didn't care. "Hey!" Her voice cracked like a whip through the morning air. The group of teens turned, startled by the fury in her tone. "What do you think you're doing?" The ringleader, a tall boy with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, smirked. "Just having some fun, Miss Brooks." "No big deal." Amara reached them in 3 long strides. She grabbed the bully's designer jacket and shoved him hard against the courtyard wall. The other students gasped, stepping back. No teacher had ever dared lay hands on one of St. Augustine's privileged students before. "Listen to me very carefully," she hissed, close enough to see the fear finally breaking through his arrogant facade. "You think you're powerful because you can torment someone who can't fight back. That makes you nothing but a coward." "My father will hear about this," the boy threatened, but his voice wavered. "Good. Tell him. Tell him how brave you were, ganging up on a disabled student. I'm sure he'll be so proud." She released him with a disgusted push. "Now pick up those books, all of you, and apologize." The teenagers looked at each other uncertainly. When Amara took a threatening step forward, they scrambled to comply. One by one, they retrieved the mud-stained books, awkwardly mumbling apologies to the boy in the wheelchair. "Now get to class," Amara ordered. "And if I ever catch you pulling something like this again, I'll make sure every college admissions board knows exactly what kind of people you are." They fled, leaving Amara alone with the boy. His dark eyes studied her with a mixture of wariness and wonder as she knelt beside his chair. "Are you all right?" she asked more gently. He nodded, accepting his restored books with careful hands. "Thank you," he said quietly. "No one's ever. I mean, they usually just look away." "Well, they shouldn't," Amara replied firmly, helping him arrange the books in his bag. "I'm Miss Brooks. What's your name?" "Luca," he answered, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Across the street, a sleek black Bentley idled silently in the morning shadows. Behind its tinted windows, Matteo Moretti watched the scene unfold with predatory focus. His fingers, adorned with heavy gold rings, drummed thoughtfully against the leather armrest as he observed the fearless teacher defend his son. Most people crossed the street when they saw Luca being bullied, too afraid of involving themselves with the Moretti heir. But this woman, this public school substitute with her Target blazer and scuffed shoes, had shown more courage than any of his armed associates. "Interesting," he murmured, his cold eyes never leaving Amara's figure as she helped Luca organize his belongings. The word held weight in the hushed interior of the car, heavy with possibilities. His driver shifted nervously in the front seat, recognizing that tone. It was the same one Matteo used before making life-altering decisions, before someone disappeared, or a new alliance was forged in blood. But this time, there was something else in the crime boss's voice. Something that hadn't been there since before the assassination attempt that had put his only son in that wheelchair. Something that might have been curiosity, or perhaps even admiration. The morning sun caught Amara's dark hair as she straightened up, casting a brief halo around her determined features. She had no idea that her simple act of kindness had caught the attention of the most dangerous man in New York. No idea that her life was about to change forever, all because she couldn't walk away from a child in need. In the sanctuary of his car, Matteo Moretti continued to watch, his expression unreadable. But his mind was already turning, calculating, planning. This woman had protected what was his, and Matteo Moretti never left a debt unpaid, whether the other party wanted his attention or not. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Amara sat alone in St. Augustine's administrative office, red pen poised over a stack of literature essays. The afternoon sun slanted through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across her desk. She'd volunteered to stay late, finding peace in the quiet routine of grading papers. A movement at the door made her look up. Two men in identical black suits filled the doorframe, their broad shoulders blocking the exit. Something about their rigid postures and blank expressions made her pulse quicken. "Miss Brooks?" The taller one stepped forward. His voice was professionally neutral, but his eyes were cold. "Our employer would like a word." Amara set down her pen, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I'm in the middle of grading. If your employer wants to speak with me, they can schedule an appointment through the school administration." The second man's lip twitched. "That's not how this works. Mr. Moretti doesn't make appointments." The name hit her like ice water. Everyone in New York knew about the Moretti family, even if people only whispered about them behind closed doors. Their reputation for violence was legendary. "I'm not going anywhere with strangers," Amara said, standing up. Her chair scraped against the floor. "Please leave before I call security." The first man actually smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Security's gone home for the day, and this isn't a request, Miss Brooks." Within minutes, Amara found herself in the back of a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, her heart hammering against her ribs. The city blurred past as they drove uptown, finally pulling through ornate iron gates into a property that looked more like a medieval fortress than a New York mansion. The men escorted her through massive double doors into a foyer, dripping with crystal chandeliers and old-world opulence. Their footsteps echoed on marble floors as they led her up a curved staircase to a study that seemed designed to intimidate. Dark wood paneling stretched to a coffered ceiling. A massive desk dominated the room, but the man behind it was what drew and held her attention. Matteo Moretti stood as she entered, and Amara's breath caught. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp features that might have been handsome, if not for the calculated coldness in his dark eyes. "Miss Brooks," his voice was smooth as aged whiskey. "Thank you for joining me." "As if I had a choice," she shot back, lifting her chin. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "There are always choices, though I admit, some are more pleasant than others." He gestured to a leather chair. "Please, sit." "I'll stand. Sit." The word carried steel this time, and Amara found herself sinking into the chair despite her determination to resist. Moretti walked around his desk, perching on the edge of it just feet from her. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you did this morning, protecting Luca." The sudden mention of the boy from that morning threw her. "Luca? The student in the wheelchair?" "My nephew." His expression softened fractionally. "He's had a difficult time since the accident. Not many people stand up for him the way you did. I was just doing my job, Amara said carefully. Any teacher would have done the same. No, they wouldn't. Moretti's eyes locked onto hers, which is precisely why you're going to be his new private tutor. Excuse me? Luca needs someone who sees him as more than just a tragedy. Someone who will challenge him, protect him. You've already proven yourself capable of both. Anger flared in Amara's chest. You can't just decide my career for me. I won't work for a criminal. In an instant, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Moretti straightened to his full height, and suddenly Amara remembered exactly who she was talking to. This was the man they called the Ice King, whose enemies had a habit of disappearing. I'm not asking, Miss Brooks. His voice was soft, deadly. You'll be generously compensated, of course. But make no mistake, this isn't a negotiation. Amara shot to her feet, hands shaking with fury and fear. Go to hell. I won't be bullied into this, no matter how powerful you think you are. She spun on her heel and stormed out, half expecting to be stopped. But no one moved to intercept her, as she practically ran down the stairs and out the front door. The cool air hit her flushed face as she walked quickly down the long driveway, her steps crunching on gravel. From the balcony of his study, Matteo Moretti watched her retreat, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. She was even more fascinating up close. All that fire and defiance packed into such a delicate frame. His men would ensure she made it home safely. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow she would learn that no one really said no to him. Not for long. The evening air carried a chill as Amara fumbled with her keys outside her third-floor walk-up. Her hands still trembled from her confrontation with Matteo Moretti earlier that day. The memory of his cold, calculating stare made her skin crawl even now. Inside her small apartment, she leaned against the closed door and let out a long breath. The familiar surroundings helped calm her nerves, worn but comfortable furniture, walls lined with overflowing bookshelves, the gentle purr of her tabby cat Pepper greeting her. Just a normal night, she whispered to herself, moving to the kitchen. No more thoughts about dangerous men or their threats. She pulled ingredients from her fridge, determined to lose herself in the simple ritual of cooking dinner. The sizzle of garlic in oil and the steady rhythm of chopping, vegetables worked their magic. By the time her pasta was ready, she had almost convinced herself the day's events were behind her. Settling onto her second-hand couch with a bowl of pasta and her favorite worn paperback, Amara tried to focus on the words. Pepper curled in her lap, purring contentedly. The neighborhood sounds drifted up, cars passing, distant sirens, the usual New York symphony. The crash shattered everything. Glass exploded inward as a brick smashed through her living room window. Pepper yowled and bolted. Amara's bowl clattered to the floor as she scrambled back, heart thundering. Cold air rushed in through the jagged hole as paper fluttered down a note wrapped around the brick. With trembling fingers, she unfolded it. You should have stayed out of Moretti business. Next time won't be a warning. Amara grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. The operator's voice was bored, detached. Location of your emergency? She reported the attack, voice rising with panic as she described the threat. But as soon as she mentioned Moretti's name, the operator's tone changed. Ma'am, we'll send a car to file a report, but… A hesitation. You might want to handle this through other channels. Other channels? Someone just threw a brick through my window. They threatened me. Look, if this involves certain families, there's not much we can do. The report will be filed. But Amara hung up, fury mixing with her fear. She paced her apartment, jumping at every sound from the street below. Pepper watched from her hiding spot under the bed, eyes wide in the darkness. 2 hours crawled by. No police car came. The knock at her door made her freeze. Miss Brooks? A man's voice, professional but firm. We need you to come with us. She peered through the peephole. 2 suited men stood in her hallway. Matteo's men, she recognized them from earlier. Her stomach dropped. Go away! I'm calling the police." "They won't come," the first man said. "The Rossi family made their threat. You're a target now. The boss sent us to collect you before they try again." Amara's mind raced. The Rossis she'd heard whispers about the rival crime family, if they thought she was aligned with Moretti. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she called through the door, even as cold fear crept up her spine. "Then you'll be dead by morning." The words were flat, matter of fact. "Your choice." Heavy footsteps in the stairwell made both men turn. Matteo Moretti himself emerged from the shadows, his presence filling the narrow hallway. His dark suit was immaculate, his expression unreadable as he studied her door. "Open up, Piccola," he called, his voice deceptively soft. "We need to talk." Something in his tone made her unlock the door with trembling hands. He filled the doorway, his gaze taking in the broken window, the scattered glass, her fear. "The Rossis move quickly," he said, stepping inside uninvited. "They think hurting you will hurt me. And they're right. Anyone under my protection is untouchable. You made yourself my concern when you defended Luca." "I didn't ask for your protection," Amara shot back, anger overtaking fear. "I don't want any part of this. Yet here we are." His eyes hardened. "You have two choices. Stay under my roof, where I can ensure your safety, and you can continue tutoring Luca. Or," he gestured to the broken window, "take your chances with them. They won't show mercy just because you wish to stay neutral." Amara wrapped her arms around herself, mind spinning. Everything in her screamed to refuse, to run. But where could she go that they wouldn't find her? "I need to pack," she said finally, voice hollow. Matteo nodded to his men, who took up positions by the door and window. She moved through her apartment in a daze, stuffing clothes and essentials into a small duffel bag. Pepper meowed questioningly as Amara scooped her into a carrier. "The cat comes too," she told Matteo, daring him to object. He simply inclined his head. The ride to his mansion was silent. Amara stared out the tinted windows at the passing city lights, her world tilting on its axis. The brick had shattered more than her window. It had shattered her illusion of safety, of normalcy. "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Beside her in the back seat, Matteo's lips curved in a slight smile, but he said nothing. The city fell away as they headed toward his fortified estate, toward a world Amara had never wanted to enter. But now, it seemed, she had no choice. The sleek black SUV glided through New York's morning traffic, its tinted windows concealing the passengers within. Amara sat in the back beside Luca's wheelchair, while Matteo occupied the seat across from them, his presence filling the confined space with an unmistakable intensity. Luca fidgeted with his tablet, his shoulders tense. "I hate these appointments," he muttered, not meeting anyone's eyes. "They're necessary," Matteo replied, his voice gentler than usual when addressing his nephew. His gaze shifted to Amara, who had been Luca's tutor for the past 3 weeks. "You're doing well in your studies?" "He's brilliant," Amara answered, her hand instinctively reaching for Luca's shoulder. His essay on Macbeth showed incredible insight. The boy's face brightened slightly at her praise, though anxiety still lined his features. Matteo watched their interaction with unreadable eyes, his fingers drumming against his expensive suit pants. The private medical facility loomed ahead, all glass and steel. As their convoy of 3 vehicles pulled up, Matteo's men moved with practiced precision, securing the area before opening any doors. Amara had grown somewhat used to this routine, but it still made her stomach clench. Inside, the waiting room fell silent as they entered. Matteo's reputation preceded him. Whispers followed their group like shadows. Mothers pulled there, children closer. A man in a business suit practically stumbled in his haste to clear their path. "Mr. Moretti," the receptionist stammered. "Dr. Williams will see Luca right away." Matteo's presence seemed to fill the entire space, his cold authority making even the air feel heavier. He stood behind Luca's wheelchair, one hand resting possessively on its handle, while his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. The appointment itself was brief, a routine check on Luca's spine and mobility. Amara helped keep him distracted with quiet conversations about their latest book discussion, while Matteo spoke in low tones with the doctor. It was on the drive back that everything changed. The first indication was their driver suddenly swerving, followed by the deafening crack of gunfire. Amara's world exploded into chaos as bullets peppered the armored vehicle, making dull thuds against the reinforced glass. "Down!" Matteo roared, already moving. His body language transformed instantly from controlled businessman to lethal predator. "Shield him." Amara didn't hesitate. She threw herself over Luca, pulling him from his wheelchair onto the floor of the SUV. The boy trembled against her as more shots rang out, followed by the sound of screeching tires and shouting men. Matteo pulled a handgun from his jacket with practiced ease. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice ice cold. "Don't move until I come back." Before Amara could protest, he was out of the vehicle, moving with deadly grace. Through the bulletproof windows, she watched in horror as he engaged their attackers. This wasn't the controlled, sophisticated man she knew. This was death incarnate. He moved like a shadow between cars, each shot from his weapon finding its mark with terrifying precision. One attacker fell, then another. Matteo's men joined the fight, but it was their boss who commanded the scene, executing their enemies with mechanical efficiency. A man tried to flee. Matteo caught him with 2 shots, to the back. Another raised his hands in surrender. Matteo didn't hesitate, the bullet entering precisely between the man's eyes. "Don't look," Amara whispered to Luca, holding him closer as the violence unfolded. But she couldn't tear her own eyes away from the brutal display. This was the real Matteo Moretti, the man whose name made hardened criminals tremble. The gunfire ceased. Bodies littered the street, blood staining the asphalt. Matteo stood among the carnage, his expensive suit spattered with red, his face a mask of cold fury. He spoke briefly to his men before turning back to the SUV. When he opened the door, Amara flinched instinctively, but his movements were careful, gentle even, as he crouched before them. Blood droplets marked his cheek, yet his eyes had softened somehow as they fell on Luca and her. "You're safe," he said softly, reaching out to touch both their faces with surprising tenderness. "As long as you're mine." The words sent a shiver down Amara's spine, both a promise and a threat, protection and possession wrapped into one. She met his gaze and saw something fierce there, something that went beyond mere ownership or duty. In that moment, spattered with his enemy's blood and speaking with such gentleness, he was both monster and protector, killer and guardian. Luca's grip on her hand tightened, and she squeezed back reassuringly, even as sirens began to wail in the distance. Matteo's men were already cleaning up, erasing evidence with practiced efficiency. Soon this would be just another unexplained incident in the city's underbelly. But Amara knew she would never forget the sight of Matteo moving through that battlefield, dealing death with terrifying grace, only to return to them with such careful tenderness. Sunlight crept through heavy silk curtains, casting golden patterns across the most luxurious bedroom Amara had ever seen. She blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling, with its ornate crown molding. The events of yesterday crashed back like a wave, the attack, the blood, Matteo's cold efficiency as he eliminated threats to protect them. The king-sized bed felt like sleeping on a cloud, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Designer furniture in dark wood filled the spacious room, and a sitting area near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens below. This was definitely not her cramped apartment anymore. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Brooks?" a woman's voice called. "May I come in?" "Yes?" Amara answered uncertainly. A middle-aged woman in a pressed uniform entered, her silver-streaked hair pulled back severely. "I'm Mrs. Romano, the head housekeeper. Mister? Moretti asked me to help you get settled." Her tone was professional but cool, clearly reserving judgment on this newcomer in their midst. "Thank you, but I can manage," Amara began. "Breakfast will be served in 30 minutes. I've laid out suitable clothing in the closet. The bathroom is through there." fully stocked with everything you'll need. Mrs. Romano's efficiency brooked no argument. I'll return to escort you to the dining room. Left alone, Amara explored her new cage. The ensuite bathroom gleamed with marble and chrome, complete with a rainfall shower and soaking tub. The walk-in closet held designer clothes in exactly her size, a detail that made her skin crawl. How long had Matteo been planning this? After showering and dressing in the least expensive-looking outfit she could find, dark jeans and a cream sweater, Mrs. Romano returned to lead her through the mansion's maze-like corridors. Amara tried to memorize the route, noting security cameras at every turn and armed men stationed strategically throughout. The formal dining room could have seated 20, but only 3 places were set at one end of the massive table. Luca was already there, his face lighting up when he saw her. "You're really staying," he exclaimed. "Will you be my teacher now? The other tutors were boring, but you make everything interesting." Before Amara could respond, Matteo entered silently through another door. "Good morning," he said, his deep voice sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "I trust you slept well?" "Like a prisoner in a golden cage," Amara replied sharply. His lips quirked. "You'll find the cage is for your protection, Kara." He gestured to a stern-faced man by the door. "This is Marco, my head of security. He'll brief you on the rules." Marco stepped forward, his expression hard. "The grounds are secure, but you must stay within designated areas. Guards are posted at all exits. No phone calls without approval. No visitors. No leaving without an escort." His eyes narrowed. "No exceptions." "And if I refuse these rules?" Amara challenged. "Then you're free to leave," Matteo said smoothly, buttering a piece of toast. "Though I wouldn't recommend it. My enemies now know your face. The only way you'll make it past those gates alive is with my protection." Luca shifted uncomfortably in his wheelchair. "Please stay, Amara. I need your help with my English paper anyway." Her heart softened at his pleading look. This boy was an innocent caught in this dangerous world just like her. "Of course I'll help you, Luca." After breakfast, Amara tested her boundaries, walking the mansion's endless hallways. She found a stunning library, a state-of-the-art gym, and various sitting rooms, all monitored by cameras and guards who watched her every move with undisguised suspicion. The gardens looked beautiful through the bulletproof glass, but every door leading outside was locked and guarded. She was examining a keypad lock when Matteo's voice made her jump. "Looking for escape routes?" "Just getting familiar with my prison," she shot back. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the narrow hallway. "This isn't a prison, Amara. It's a fortress. The same walls that keep you in keep death out." His dark eyes held hers. "The only way anyone leaves this house without my permission is in a coffin. Remember that." Throughout the day, staff members scurried around her like she was radioactive. Only Luca seemed genuinely happy to have her there, eagerly showing her his schoolwork and chattering about books they could read together. His enthusiasm was the only bright spot in this gilded cage. That evening, dinner was served with all the formality of a state occasion. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier's light as servants moved silently around them. Amara picked at her perfectly cooked steak, feeling Matteo's eyes on her from across the long table. He raised his wineglass, the ruby liquid catching the light like blood. "Welcome to my world, Amara." She met his gaze steadily, refusing to show fear. This was her life now, trapped in luxury with a man who dealt in death, her only ally a wheelchair-bound boy who needed her. The crystal chimed as their glasses met, sealing her fate with the sound of bells tolling for freedom's end. Thunder rumbled outside the mansion's thick walls as Amara sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, watching Luca's face light up as they discussed the Count of Monte Cristo. The massive stone fireplace cast dancing shadows across their impromptu study space, where books and notes were spread around them in organized chaos. "So Edmond Dantes planned his revenge for years," Luca said, his wheelchair positioned close to the warmth of the flames. "He waited and learned and became powerful, just to make them pay." "That's right," Amara nodded, watching his keen mind work through the story's complexities. But what do you think about the cost of his revenge? What did he lose along the way? Neither of them noticed Mateo's silent entrance, his broad frame filling the study doorway as he observed their lesson. His dark eyes tracked every gesture, every smile shared between teacher and student. The sight of them together stirred something in his chest, an unfamiliar warmth that both pleased and unsettled him. He lost Mercedes, Luca answered thoughtfully. And maybe part of himself too. All that hate changed him. Excellent analysis, Amara praised, reaching over to squeeze his hand. The genuine affection in her voice made Mateo's jaw clench. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Mateo's presence. Luca brightened immediately. Father, will you join our lesson? Amara stiffened, but maintained her composure, turning to face the man who held them both captive in this gilded prison. Mateo stepped into the room, his expensive suit a stark contrast to their casual attire. Another time, perhaps? He said smoothly. It's getting late, Luca. Time for bed. Though Luca protested, his nurse appeared moments later to wheel him away. Amara began gathering the books, her movements sharp with barely contained anger. Once Luca was gone, she stormed after Mateo, following him into his private study. The room reeked of power, all dark wood, leather and crystal decanters filled with amber liquid. Mateo stood behind his massive desk, loosening his tie as he watched her approach with predatory interest. You can't keep controlling every aspect of his life, Amara snapped, planting her hands on the desk between them. He needs freedom to grow, to make friends his own age. Mateo's laugh was cold. Freedom? Like the freedom those boys gave him when they threw his books in the mud? The world is cruel to those it sees as weak. So your solution is to lock him away? You're nothing but a tyrant, she spat, electricity crackling between them as she stepped around the desk to confront him directly. In a fluid motion, Mateo gripped her arms and spun her, pressing her back against the heavy desk. His body caged her in, faces inches apart. Careful, little teacher, he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. It's dangerous to defy me. Men have died for less. But where he expected fear, he found fire. Amara tilted her chin up, meeting his gaze with defiance burning in her eyes. I'm not one of your men, Mateo. You don't scare me. His fingers tightened on her arms, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she pressed forward slightly, their bodies aligned from chest to hip. What scares you? She continued, voice low and challenging. Is that you can't control how I make you feel. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. For a long moment, they stayed frozen in that charged embrace, hearts racing, breath mingling. Then Mateo released her abruptly, stepping back as if burned. Get out, he ordered roughly, turning away to hide the confusion in his eyes. Amara didn't need to be told twice. She fled to her room, slamming the door behind her. Her whole body trembled with adrenaline, and something else, something she refused to name. Pacing the length of her luxurious prison, she pressed trembling fingers to her lips, where his breath had ghosted across them. Damn him, she whispered fiercely, angry at herself for the way her skin still tingled where he'd touched her, angry at how her body had responded to his proximity, betraying her with a rush of heat that had nothing to do with fear. Thunder crashed outside, matching the storm raging in her heart. She caught her reflection in the ornate mirror, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, lips slightly parted. The sight only fueled her fury. How dare she feel desire for a man like him, a criminal who held her captive, who ruled through violence and intimidation? But she couldn't deny the electricity that had sparked between them, the way time seemed to stop when he held her against that desk. The memory of his solid warmth pressed against her made her shiver despite the room's comfortable temperature. Amara threw herself onto the bed, burying her face in the silk pillows with a frustrated groan. Sleep would be impossible now, with her mind replaying every second of their confrontation. The way his eyes had darkened when she challenged him, the slight tremor in his hands when she called him out on his feelings. I hate him, she told herself firmly, even as her treacherous body remembered the intoxicating mix of danger and desire that radiated from him. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. But alone in the darkness, with lightning illuminating her room in brief, brilliant flashes, even she didn't believe her own lies. The blaring alarms jolted Amara from her sleep, her heart thundering against her ribs. Red emergency lights pulsed through the darkness of her room as shouts and heavy footsteps echoed through the mansion's corridors. Without hesitation, she threw off her covers and ran barefoot across the cold marble floor toward Luca's room. "Miss Brooks!" One of Mateo's guards appeared at her door, gun drawn. "Stay in your—" But Amara was already gone, racing down the hallway. Her only thought was reaching Luca before anyone else did. The boy had become more than just her student. He was someone she needed to protect. She found him struggling to transfer from his bed to his wheelchair, panic clear on his young face. "Amara," he called out when she burst in. "I'm here," she whispered, rushing to help him. "We need to hide, now." The sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere downstairs, making them both flinch. Amara's hands trembled as she pushed his chair toward the walk-in closet, which she knew had a hidden panel Mateo had shown her for emergencies. They had barely made it inside when heavy footsteps approached. Amara pressed Luca against her chest, one hand covering his mouth, both of them breathing as quietly as possible in the darkness. The closet door creaked open. A man in tactical gear swept the space with his gun, moving methodically closer to their hiding spot. Amara's muscles tensed, ready to throw herself between Luca and danger if necessary. The assassin's boot was inches from the panel when a shadow appeared behind him. Mateo moved like a ghost, deadly and silent. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the intruder's head and slammed it against the wall. The man's gun clattered to the floor as Mateo spun him around, landing precise blows that spoke of years of violence. Blood sprayed across the expensive wallpaper as Mateo's fist connected with the assassin's face repeatedly. "You dare!" Mateo snarled, his usual cold control fractured by rage. "Come into my home?" He slammed the man down, pressing a knee into his chest. "Touch what's mine." The assassin struggled, but Mateo drew his gun with practiced ease. 3 shots rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. Amara couldn't look away as blood pooled across the floor, seeping into the Persian rug. Her body shook, but not entirely from fear. There was something primal about watching Mateo defend them, something that made her pulse race for reasons she didn't want to examine. Mateo stood slowly, his white shirt spattered with red. His eyes found the hidden panel immediately. "Amara," he called out, voice rough with adrenaline. "It's clear now." She helped Luca out, trying to shield him from the carnage, but the boy had already seen too much in his young life. Mateo crossed to them in 2 long strides, his hands ghosting over both of them, checking for injuries. "No one touches you," he growled, fingers lingering on Amara's shoulder. "Ever." His touch left trails of fire on her skin, even through her nightgown. Their eyes locked, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. Hours later, after the mansion had been secured and Luca was finally asleep under heavy guard, Mateo appeared at her door. He had changed clothes, but couldn't hide the weight of violence that clung to him like a second skin. Without asking permission, he entered and sat heavily in the armchair by her window. Amara watched him from her bed, wrapped in a thick robe. The dim light from her bedside lamp caught the silver at his temples, the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. For once, the dim light from her bedside lamp, infamous Mafia boss, looked almost human. "The attack years ago," he said finally, staring out at the darkness. "The one that put Luca in that chair, it was meant for me." His voice carried decades of guilt. "My own brother betrayed our family, tried to take control. I was supposed to be in that car." Amara's chest tightened at the raw pain in his confession. "That's why you're so protective of him." "I failed him," Mateo's hands clenched into fists. "My nephew paid the price for my position, my power. Every time I see him in that chair." He trailed off, eyes haunted by memories. Without thinking, Amara slipped from her bed and crossed to him. Her hand found his, fingers sliding between his clenched ones. His skin was warm, calloused from weapons and work. He stared at their joined hands as if they were something impossible. "You didn't fail him," she whispered. "You're here now, keeping him safe, keeping us both safe." The words surprised her, even as she said them, but they rang true. Despite everything, despite who he was and what he'd done, she felt protected in his dangerous hands. Mateo's fingers tightened around hers, and for a moment, they sat in silence, connected by touch and trauma, and things neither dared name. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, full of threats and shadows. But in this room, in this moment, Amara felt the strangest sense of peace. The morning after the attack, sunlight streamed through the mansion's windows, but Amara felt anything but bright. Her hands trembled as she poured her coffee, remembering how Mateo had looked with blood on his hands, how his eyes had burned when he'd confessed his guilt about Luca. Most of all, she remembered the warmth of his skin when she touched him, a moment of connection that terrified her. She spent the morning in Luca's study room, throwing herself into their lessons to avoid thinking about his uncle. But Mateo's presence haunted every corner of the mansion. Even when he wasn't there, his power lingered like a shadow. By late afternoon, Amara needed escape. She slipped out to the mansion's gardens, where roses climbed ancient stone walls and fountain water trickled in peaceful streams. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and crimson. Here, she could almost forget she was a prisoner. Almost. "Running from me, little teacher?" Mateo's voice came from behind her, deep and knowing. Amara's spine stiffened, but she didn't turn around. "I'm not running. I just needed air. Look at me when you lie," he commanded softly. "You've been avoiding me since last night." Amara spun to face him, lifting her chin. Mateo stood closer than she'd expected, his tall frame blocking out the dying Sunday. He'd loosened his tie, and a few dark strands of hair fell across his forehead. It made him look almost human. "I'm not lying," she insisted. "And I don't take orders from you, Mr. Moretti." His mouth curved into that dangerous half-smile she'd come to dread. "No? Then why are you backing away?" Amara realized she had indeed taken several steps backward, until her legs hit a stone bench. Mateo followed, eating up the distance between them with predatory grace. "You're afraid," he observed. "Of you? Never." "No." He reached out, fingers brushing her cheek. "You're afraid of how much you want me." "You're delusional," Amara breathed, but her voice shook. "You're a killer. A monster." "Yes." His thumb traced her bottom lip. "And yet you touched me last night. You saw the blood on my hands and still reached for me. That was—" But before she could finish, Mateo's mouth crashed down on hers. The kiss was brutal, possessive, his hands tangling in her hair to hold her still. Amara's hands came up to push him away, but somehow ended up clutching his shirt instead. He tasted like expensive whiskey and danger. She bit his lip in defiance. Instead of pulling back, he growled and deepened the kiss, backing her up against a stone column. His body pressed against hers, hard muscle and barely contained violence. "Fight me all you want, Kara," he murmured against her mouth. "But we both know you're mine now." "I hate you," she gasped, as his lips traveled down her neck. "Lie to yourself if you must." His hands gripped her hips, lifting her easily. "But your body can't lie to me." What followed was a blur of sensation. Somehow they made it to his bedroom, leaving a trail of clothing behind. Mateo's hands were everywhere, alternating between bruising possession and tender worship. He touched her like she was precious and fragile, even as he marked her skin with his teeth. "You're my obsession," he confessed roughly as he moved above her. "My salvation. The only light in all this darkness." Amara should have been terrified. This man had killed without hesitation, had trapped her in his world of violence and power. But when he looked at her with those intense dark eyes, she saw past the monster to the wounded man beneath. Her hands traced the scars on his chest, and he shuddered. "Let me in," she whispered, not sure if she was begging or demanding. For answer, he kissed her again, softer this time. When they came together, it was with a desperation that shook them both. Matteo murmured Italian endearments against her skin. His usual iron control shattered. Amara felt herself falling, drowning in sensation and emotion she couldn't name. Hours later, as false dawn began to paint the sky, Amara drifted awake slowly. She was tangled in black silk sheets in Matteo's strong arms, her head pillowed on his chest. His heartbeat was steady under her ear, his breathing deep and even in sleep. One of his hands was curved possessively around her hip, as if afraid she'd try to escape. Looking up at his sleeping face, Amara felt a complicated mix of emotions surge through her. Here was the most dangerous man in New York, feared by enemies and allies alike, holding her like she was something precious. The same hands that had dealt death now traced gentle patterns on her skin. She should have felt trapped. Instead, she felt cherished, protected. And that terrified her more than any display of violence ever could. Matteo stirred slightly, pulling her closer in his sleep. Amara let herself be drawn in, even as her mind raced with the implications of what had happened between them. She was in the devil's bed, in the devil's arms. And God help her. She never wanted to leave. Amara's fingers traced the spines of leather-bound books in Matteo's office, her heart pounding against her ribs. She shouldn't be here, every instinct screamed at her to leave. But after last night, after feeling his touch, his kiss, she needed answers. The massive mahogany desk dominated the room like a throne. Afternoon sunlight filtered through bulletproof windows, casting long shadows across the Persian rug. She glanced at the door, listening for footsteps. Matteo was in a meeting downstairs. She had maybe 15 minutes. Her hands shook as she eased open the top drawer. Files, folders, documents in Italian she couldn't read. The second drawer held more of the same, but the third her breath caught. A familiar face stared up at her from a surveillance photo. Dark hair. Same nose as hers. Same defiance set to the jaw. "Marcus," she whispered, touching her brother's image. More photos spilled out. Marcus outside a warehouse. Marcus with men she didn't recognize. Reports, bank statements, a detailed timeline of his movements over the past year. Her stomach churned as she found older photos of herself. Outside her apartment, at the school, even at the grocery store, dates going back months before she'd ever met Matteo. Looking for something specific? Matteo's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Amara jerked upright, papers scattering across the desk. He stood in the doorway, expression unreadable, but his eyes were arctic cold. "You've been watching me," she said, voice trembling. "All this time, before I ever met Luca. Why?" He stepped into the room, closing the door with a soft click that felt like a prison gate shutting. "Your brother works for the Catalano family. My enemies." The words hit her like physical blows. Marcus, the brother who'd disappeared from her life 3 years ago, who'd stopped answering her calls, who'd missed their mother's funeral, was working for criminals? Was part of this dark world? "No," she shook her head. "You're lying. I never lied to you, Amara." Matteo moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. Marcus Brooks joined them 2 years ago. He's been helping them move weapons, launder money. When you appeared at Luca's school, I needed to know if it was a coincidence. Understanding crashed over her like ice water. That's why you brought me here. Why you insisted I stay. I was never anything but a pawn to you, was I? A way to get to my brother? It's more complicated than that. Is it? Fury rose in her chest, hot and choking. Was any of it real? Or was I just another chess piece in your precious war? His jaw tightened. What happened between us was real. Like hell it was. She grabbed the files, throwing them at his chest. Papers rained down around them. You manipulated me from the start. Used Luca to pull me in. Threatened me to keep me here. And I actually started to feel something for you, you bastard. Matteo caught her wrist as she moved to shove past him. His grip was gentle but immovable. Listen to me. No, she yanked free. You're a monster. Everything they say about you is true. You don't care about anyone but yourself and your precious empire." Something flickered in his eyes, pain maybe or anger, but his voice remained controlled. "You don't understand the game being played here. I understand perfectly." Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I'm done being your prisoner, done being used." She ran, past his guards, down the marble stairs, through the grand foyer. No one stopped her. She grabbed her coat from the rack, fumbling with the buttons as she burst out into the cold evening air. Behind her, the mansion loomed like a beautiful trap she was finally escaping. Her feet carried her down the long driveway, past the iron gates that stood mysteriously open. No bullets in her back. No hands grabbing her. Just silence and the sound of her own ragged breathing. In the dark hallway of his home, Matteo stood motionless, watching through the window as her figure disappeared into the gathering dusk. His fists clenched at his sides, knuckles white with restraint. The urge to chase her, to drag her back, to explain everything burned through his veins like fire. But he remained still, tasting blood where his teeth had cut into his cheek. Let her run. Let her think she was free of him. The truth was far more complicated than she knew, and far more dangerous. "You don't understand," he whispered to the empty hall, to her vanished shadow. "You're already mine." The words echoed in the darkness, a promise and a curse. Whatever game his enemies were playing, whatever role her brother had in their plans, he would protect her. Whether she wanted his protection or not, whether she ever forgave him or not. Because Amara Brooks had become more than a strategic move on his chessboard, more than a means to an end. She'd become his weakness, his obsession, his salvation, and Matteo Moretti did not let go of what belonged to him. Not even when they ran. Amara huddled on the scratchy motel bedspread, tears streaming down her face as neon light filtered through the threadbare curtains. The cheap room smelled of stale cigarettes and despair, but she didn't care. Anything was better than staying in that mansion, being played for a fool. Her phone buzzed for the 20th time Matteo. She hurled it across the room, watching it bounce off the peeling wallpaper. How could she have been so stupid? Every touch, every kiss, every tender moment had been calculated. He'd known about Marcus all along, using her connection to his enemies like the ruthless strategist he was. The bedside clock blinked 11:15 in angry red numbers. Outside, traffic rushed past on the highway, punctuated by the occasional blaring horn. Amara wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater, trying to gather her thoughts. She needed a plan. Money. A new identity, maybe. Anything to get far away from. The door exploded inward with a deafening crack. Amara screamed as 3 men in black tactical gear burst through, weapons raised. Before she could move, rough hands grabbed her arms, shoving her face first into the mattress. "Got the boss's little plaything," one growled, zip-tying her wrists behind her back. The plastic cut into her skin as she thrashed. "Let me go," she kicked out, connecting with something solid. A grunt of pain, then a vicious slap across her face that made stars burst behind her eyes. "Feisty one," another voice laughed. "The Rossi family sends their regards to Moretti." They dragged her outside into the cold night air. Amara fought every step, digging her heels in, twisting against their grip. A black van idled in the parking lot, its rear doors open like a waiting coffin. The man who seemed to be in charge grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. In the harsh parking lot lights, she could see the cruel amusement in his eyes. "We're going to send you back to your boyfriend piece by piece. Maybe start with those pretty fingers of yours." Terror clawed at her throat, but rage burned hotter. With a snarl, Amara lunged forward and sank her teeth into his hand. He howled, jerking back. She used the momentum to slam her head into his nose. Blood sprayed. "You bitch!" He backhanded her so hard she tasted copper. Still, she fought as they wrestled her toward the van. Her nails found flesh, raking deep gouges down one man's face. He cursed, but kept his grip. Another grabbed her legs as she kicked wildly. "Enough!" The leader pulled a gun, pressing the cold metal to her temple. "One more move, and I put a bullet in your skull right here." Amara went still, chest heaving. They threw her onto the van's metal floor like a sack of garbage. The doors slammed shut, plunging her into darkness broken only by thin strips of light from the street. Tires squealed as they peeled out of the parking lot. Amara lay there, feeling every bump and turn as tears leaked from her eyes. Not from fear now, but fury. At herself for running. At Matteo for his lies. At these men who thought they could use her as a pawn in their bloody games. Meanwhile, back at the Moretti mansion, chaos reigned. Guards rushed through marble halls. Phones rang endlessly, and Matteo's thunderous voice echoed off the walls as he issued rapid-fire orders in Italian. Luca sat in his wheelchair by the grand staircase, shoulders shaking with sobs. "It's my fault," he kept whispering. "She only stayed for me." Matteo strode past, every line of his body rigid with barely contained violence. His usual icy control had shattered the moment his men reported finding Amara's abandoned motel room, signs of struggle everywhere. Now raw fury blazed in his eyes, turning them almost black. He gathered his top lieutenants in the study, the same room where he'd first kissed Amara, where she'd challenged him, matched his fire with her own. The memory made his hands clench into fists. "Find her," he commanded, voice deadly quiet. "Turn this city upside down. I want every rat hole, every warehouse, every safe house searched. Bring me anyone who might know where the Rossis took her." One of his men cleared his throat. "Boss, if they've already..." Matteo's hand shot out, grabbing him by the throat. "She's alive," he snarled, "and I will paint these streets red with anyone who dares touch her." He released the man, who stumbled back gasping. The others watched with wary eyes as Matteo stalked to the window, staring out at the New York skyline. In the glass reflection, they could see the mask of the feared Ice King crackling, revealing something far more dangerous beneath. "I swear before all of you," he said, each word carved from steel and shadow. "I'll burn this world to ash to get her back." The oath hung in the air like smoke. His men exchanged glances, recognizing a fundamental shift in their leader. The cold calculation that made him legendary had been replaced by something primal, something that promised devastation. For the first time, they truly understood Amara wasn't just another possession to their boss. She was his heart. And now that heart had been stolen, there would be no mercy, no limits to what Matteo Moretti would do to reclaim it. The night exploded with gunfire, as Matteo's men swept through the city like an unstoppable plague. His orders were simple. Find Amara, kill everyone else, no mercy, no survivors. In his armored SUV, Matteo studied the city map spread across his lap, marking off locations in blood-red ink. 3 rival safe houses already lay in ruins, their occupants executed. The streets of Little Italy ran red, bodies slumped in doorways and sprawled across sidewalks. Shop windows shattered under the rain of bullets as his soldiers hunted their prey building by building. "Boss," his Lieutenant Carlo reported, face grim. "The Rossi crew's headquarters just went up in flames. No sign of her." Matteo's jaw clenched. He'd already killed 37 men tonight, each death bringing him no closer to Amara. His hands, usually steady on the trigger, trembled with barely contained rage. The thought of her alone, afraid, possibly hurt, it made his vision blur red. "Sweep the docks," he ordered, voice like Arctic ice. "Every warehouse, every shipping container. I want them found before sunrise." Across town, in a grimy warehouse reeking of fish and diesel fuel, Amara struggled against the zip ties cutting into her wrists. Her captors paced nervously, making frantic phone calls as explosions lit up the night sky. Even here, she could hear the chaos, screams, gunfire, and the steady march of violence drawing closer. "Your boyfriend's gone crazy," one thug sneered, grabbing her chin roughly. "Half the city's burning because of you." Amara jerked away from his touch, heart pounding. She'd seen Matteo kill before, but this was different. This was systematic destruction, a monster unleashed, and it was all for her. The warehouse doors burst open as another man ran in, panic etched on his face. They hit the Martinez crew. Everyone's dead, even the kids. Jesus Christ, the leader muttered, pacing faster. This is too much heat. We should just kill her and run. No, a new voice cut in. Older, authoritative. Their boss emerged from the shadows, face twisted with cruel determination. Moretti wants his woman? Let him find her piece by piece. He approached Amara slowly, pulling out a knife that gleamed in the dim light. She fought to hide her terror as he traced the blade along her cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. Such a pretty thing, he mused. I see why he keeps you. Maybe I'll have some fun first. Send him a video of the warehouse windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and gunfire. Mateo's men rappelled down from the ceiling, their automatic weapons cutting down guards like wheat before a scythe. Through the chaos, Amara saw him. Mateo, striding through the carnage like death incarnate. He moved with lethal grace, each shot precise and brutal. When his gun clicked empty, he switched to a knife, slashing throats and driving the blade into hearts with mechanical efficiency. His expensive suit was splattered with blood, his face a mask of cold fury. Her captor grabbed her, pressing his knife to her throat. Stay back, I'll kill her. Mateo didn't even pause. He hurled his knife with surgical precision, catching the man between the eyes. As the body crumpled, Amara saw their boss trying to flee. Mateo's hand shot out, catching him by the throat. You dared to touch what's mine, Mateo snarled, forcing the man to his knees. You dared to threaten her, the rival boss blubbered, begging for mercy. Mateo showed none. With methodical brutality, he broke the man's fingers one by one, extracting screams and the names of every conspirator. When he finished, he put a bullet through each knee, ensuring a slow death. Stepping over the writhing body, Mateo finally reached Amara. His hands, still wet with blood, trembled as he cut her bonds. The mask of violence cracked, revealing raw anguish beneath. He cupped her face with infinite gentleness, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I thought I lost you, he whispered hoarsely, voice rough with emotion. Never again. Amara should have been terrified. She just witnessed him butcher dozens of men without hesitation or remorse. But as his arms wrapped around her, she felt only safe. Protected. The monster who'd painted the city red with blood now cradled her like she was made of glass. I'm sorry, she breathed against his chest. I shouldn't have run. Shh, he soothed, pressing his lips to her temple. You're safe now. That's all that matters. Around them, his men secured the warehouse, efficiently disposing of bodies and evidence. The night's violence would be headlines tomorrow, but the true story would never be told. How New York's most feared Mafia boss had unleashed hell itself to save one woman. Mateo lifted her easily, carrying her past the carnage toward the waiting car. Let's go home, he murmured. Luca's waiting. Amara closed her eyes, breathing in his familiar scent beneath the copper tang of blood. She knew there would be consequences to tonight's slaughter, new enemies rising from the ashes, but wrapped in Mateo's arms, feeling his heart thunder against hers, she couldn't bring herself to care. He was her monster, her protector, her salvation, and she was his, now and always. Sunlight streamed through the mansion's tall windows, casting golden ribbons across the marble floors. 3 weeks had passed since Amara's rescue, and the Moretti estate had settled into a new rhythm. The sound of Luca's laughter echoed through the halls more frequently now, mixing with Amara's gentle voice as she guided him through his lessons. In the mansion's private library, Amara sat beside Luca, her finger trailing along the lines of Shakespeare's sonnets. The young boy's face lit up with understanding as she explained the deeper meanings hidden within the verses. From the doorway, Mateo watched them, his usual stern expression softened by something that looked almost like peace. The staff had noticed the change too. Where once they'd viewed Amara with suspicion, they now greeted her with genuine warmth. Maria, the elderly housekeeper, even started leaving fresh flowers in Amara's room each morning. The guards who once watched her like a prisoner now protected her like family. Miss Brooks, Lucas said, closing his literature book. "Will you always be my teacher?" Amara's heart squeezed at the vulnerability in his voice. "As long as you want me to be," she promised, smoothing his hair. Later that evening, Mateo led Amara to his private study. The room still held memories of their first heated confrontation, but now it felt different. The dark wood panels and leather-bound books no longer seemed threatening. They'd become familiar, almost comfortable. "Sit," Mateo commanded softly, gesturing to the leather armchair near his desk. His voice still carried that edge of authority, but Amara had learned to read the tenderness beneath it. She watched as he moved to his safe, his broad shoulders tense with an emotion she couldn't quite read. When he turned back to her, he held something small and metallic in his palm. "This ring," he said, his voice rougher than usual, "has been in the Moretti family for 4 generations. The gold band caught the light. It's large ruby surrounded by diamonds that sparkled like captured stars. My father gave it to my mother. She wore it until the day she died." Amara's breath caught in her throat as Mateo knelt before her, not like a supplicant, but like a king bestowing an honor. "In my world," he continued, "this means more than any legal document. This makes you mine in the eyes of everyone who matters." Tears welled in Amara's eyes as he took her hand. His touch, usually so commanding, was gentle now. "You fought me at every turn," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "You challenged me when my own men wouldn't dare. You protected Luca without thought for yourself. You've brought light into our darkness." The ring slid onto her finger, heavy with history and meaning. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, to all of it." Their wedding was a blend of old-world tradition and Mafia grandeur. The mansion's ballroom transformed into a cathedral of white flowers and crystal lights. Luca, beaming from his wheelchair, held the rings. The city's most powerful families attended, watching as the feared Matteo Moretti claimed his bride. That night, in their private chambers, Matteo traced the curve of Amara's cheek with reverent fingers. The moonlight painted silver shadows across their skin, and the world beyond their windows seemed to fade away. "Do you know what you've done to me?" he murmured, his lips brushing her temple. "The entire city trembles at my name. Men beg for mercy at my feet. But you," his voice dropped lower, heavy with emotion, "you walked into my life and claimed everything I am without firing a single shot." Amara's hands found his face, thumbs stroking along his jaw. "You're not just the monster they fear anymore," she whispered. "You're the man who would burn down the world to protect what he loves. You're the father who reads to Luca every night. You're mine." Matteo's eyes darkened with passion and possession. "The world fears me," he confessed against her skin. "But you own me." His kiss claimed her mouth, sealing their future with the taste of forever. The Moretti mansion had witnessed countless dark deeds, had echoed with screams and gunfire. But now, in the quiet of night, it held something different. The soft sounds of love, the warmth of family, the promise of happiness ever after. The devil had found his angel, and neither heaven nor hell could tear them apart. Their kiss deepened, a testament to the truth they'd both finally accepted. That sometimes the greatest love stories are written in shadow and light, in danger and salvation, in the space between who we are and who we become for the ones we love. Thanks for spending a moment here with me. If this story touched you, let's keep this connection going. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.